Hey everyone, welcome to the season finale of More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and for our final episode before we take a break for this year's Artisan Limited production, it's kind of a continuation of sorts with our last topic of conversation, because at that point we were talking about antagonists from Disney and Studio Ghibli, how they differ, how they might be the same. Uh, this time we're kind of going in the opposite direction and talking about different heroes in general, not just from those two franchises. But the thing is, they're not just regular heroes, they're what we're calling flawed heroes. Heroes that aren't just like the poster boy of all things that is good. They have problems, they have challenges, they have their issues.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like too often people like look up to heroes and see like no negative things in them, like no mistakes, no bad decisions them making, and as a result, I feel like they have like too much pressure they put on themselves, or I feel like they can't mess up or something, and feels and but you have a hero that makes like a mistake or a bad decision. It's more relatable. It's more realistic. And it's easier to buy into, and that's kind of what we're kind of digging into.
Yeah, exactly. For full disclosure, it's a great idea to have characters that people can look up to, but I feel like it can be just as effective, if not more so, to have a character that someone can relate to. And if the character is absolutely perfect, there's nothing wrong with them, you risk losing that relatability. So do you want me to start? Or
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay. So I compiled a small list, and most of them ended up being from Disney or some Disney property. But the first one I thought of was not one that's known as well now. Uh, he's kind of seen a little bit of resurgence, and I'll get to that in a second. But I'm talking about a little Disney show called Darkwing Duck. For those that don't know who that is, it's kind of like Disney spoofing Batman a little bit.
Yeah.
Because, he operates mostly at night, he uses intimidation against his enemies, and blah, 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 blah. But this guy, as good of a hero as he is, he can sometimes be a bit egocentric, which is where the flawed part of the whole hero thing comes in, because a lot of times he will do it for the attention. He loves the attention. He enjoys the fame. He enjoys the fortune. He still has moments where he knows when to get serious, or when he shows that he genuinely cares about certain people. But there's even whole story arcs, whole episodes, where he pushes a lot of people out of the way just so he can do it himself. He even admits in one episode, I think it's when a bunch of his friends are trying to form a team, he's like, I want to do it myself so I can get all the glory. He fixes that by the end, of course, but the fact that he has times where he can be egocentric and a little bit too cocky, it's like there are some people like that.
Yeah, yeah. And, well, fun fact, Darkwing Duck was actually voiced by Jim Cummings, the voice actor currently for Winnie the Pooh and Tigger and a handful of other characters. If the superhero thing doesn't sell you on wanting to see it, or even Cummings being the voice of it, I'm not sure what will.
There's even times where Jim Cummings is voicing the character and people may not even notice.
Yeah.
A good example of that a lot of people are aware of at this point is when he took over for Jeremy Irons to finish the song Be Prepared. Because when the animated Lion King came out and they were doing that song, around the time Jeremy Irons got to the line, "You won't get a sniff without me," like he just blew his voice out, or something was going on with his throat, so he couldn't finish it. So Jim Cummings stepped in and did the rest. And if you listen closely, you can tell, but to the untrained ear, it's very difficult to spot.
Yeah, I couldn't tell.
Yeah, he's in a lot of stuff, especially Disney stuff. Even when Darkwing Duck kind of returned a little bit in the DuckTales reboot, Darkwing Duck made a couple appearances here and there. Uh, at least one version of him. I won't get into spoilers for those that haven't seen that version of the show. But there's technically more than one Darkwing Duck in a sense, and one of them is voiced by him. In any case, that was my first one. The next one I thought of is one that I can relate to a lot, especially since I have now played him, that being the Beast from Beauty and the Beast. This is definitely a lot more of a popular character, so I'm sure a lot of people understand why. But the fact of the matter is, he is a protagonist, but even right at the beginning of the film, you can tell that there's not a lot of good things going on with him. They even say right in the opening lines, he's selfish, spoiled, and unkind.
Yeah.
And you see that in many cases throughout the story, especially near the beginning. Then, I think I've said this in multiple episodes before when talking about this character, but if there's one thing I really like about how his story is written, even though he has all these issues, is that the way his story is told, it's basically the reverse of Gaston's. Whereas the Beast starts off as a literal monster, and he eventually becomes more human, eventually literally. Whereas Gaston starts off as human, and like everybody in the story, aside from a small handful, see him as the hero. As the story progresses, he becomes more of a monster.
Yeah, the Beast, in one way, he, for a while, you could say that he has some ulterior motives and goals, or he's focused so much on himself, but he does mature over time. Gaston is very fixated on winning Belle over, and even goes as far as to what I would call quid pro quo, well, or maybe a threat is a more technical description, to get that one thing that he wants.
Sure, and yeah, even after the Beast started trying to connect with Belle early on, you could tell that he was doing it mostly to try and just get the spell to break. He just didn't want to be this Beast thing anymore. But as the story developed and they legitimately started to form a connection, that was all starting to change. And eventually, he was connecting with her because he actually cared about her.
Yeah.
Then another Disney character I thought of was Hercules from the story of the same name. I know a lot of people, they will think about characters like Hades or even Phil. But one thing that makes Hercules a flawed hero, and it's even kind of pointed out a little bit in the movie, it's kind of like Darkwing Duck where he was, yeah, he had the ultimate motive of trying to get back home. But in the process of doing so for a little bit, he was kind of getting absorbed into all the fame he was getting. Like, he was thinking one day that he was going to go back to Olympus. And when his father Zeus was saying, "You're not quite there yet," he then starts pointing out, "I've beaten every monster I've gone up against. I'm an action figure. I'm the most famous person in all of Greece." And even Zeus is like, "I'm afraid being famous is not the same." And then, of course, Hercules was a bit frustrated because he thought he was going back home. Eventually, he did start to turn it around and focus more on just being a true hero, following his instinct. But for a little while there, he was kind of getting a little too absorbed in all the fame and attention.
Now, I think that can happen easily. I feel like I know,
Oh yeah.
even especially if you're like really insecure to begin with. I feel like that's a trap you can too easily get your foot caught in, so to speak.
Yeah, it can happen to absolutely anyone. It can go to anybody's head. Uh, but then that just adds more to the relatability. Uh, and one thing I notice a lot, especially in younger actors or younger celebrities, is that if they get too famous too fast, then that also messes with their head. Because they're so used to living one way, and then all of a sudden all this fame is being thrown at them, and they don't know what to do with it. And oftentimes, it really doesn't end well.
Yeah, you hear stories about like actors getting thrust into the spotlight, starting off really young,
Mm-hmm.
and in some cases their heart may not be 100% in it, or they've never been able to live a normal life outside of it or build a normal childhood around it, and so that kind of malforms them, and they kind of don't know how to live an adult life, or they don't know what to do, so they kind of turn to something like drugs or alcohol or some sort of crime because they're so psychologically malformed or something, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe even just confused because they don't know how to do anything else. They've only known this one thing or whatever.
And in a similar vein, uh, some of them, once they do start getting used to all the fame and attention, if they ever feel like they're starting to lose it, then they'll try to hold on to it by any means necessary, and that also can lead to some very bad decisions and just make it even worse for them. Like, you might lose your fame, but that's not nearly as bad as losing respect.
Right, yeah.
And then I thought of one character from Star Wars, and this is probably the most popular one because he's kind of the main focus, generally speaking. But I thought of Anakin Skywalker slash Darth Vader. Uh, this could be not necessarily a debate because I know people have different thoughts on the original trilogy, the prequels, and so on. But there were definitely a lot of people who had issues with how Anakin was portrayed as he was slowly turning into Darth Vader. But he is considered the main hero, or like one of the central focal points of the story. And it's like he was doing good things for a while. But then, as certain events happen, like he loses his mom, he feels like he's being cheated out of certain things, or people are just not acknowledging his efforts, or they're asking him to do things that he thinks he shouldn't do or doesn't want to do. Like it slowly eats at his mind, and eventually he turns into Darth Vader, who is just full-blown evil, and it's only near the end of Return of the Jedi that he finally sees what's going on, like why what he's doing is wrong, and he takes that moment of realization to save his son, even at the cost of his own life.
Yeah, I feel like the seeds of bitterness for Anakin were kind of being planted early on in the plot of Episode One because he was growing up a slave, and
Mm-hmm.
and you can kind of get an idea of how that weighed down on him back then. But then, of course, many of you know the arc throughout the series. He turns around 180, like he said at the end of Episode 6, and it may have taken him in his final moments to kind of get his life back around, but I think back to that. I think back to that thief on the cross next to Jesus, who's supposedly lived a whole life of crime, and then in his final moments, he has that moment of repentance just before he dies. Just like, if you're alive, it's still not too late.
Yeah, and for those that don't know the full story, the day Jesus died on the cross, he wasn't the only one up there. there were two other people on crosses next to him, which is why you often see three crosses next to each other
Right.
on top of a church. Both of them were criminals, and one of them was like, just, I don't remember his exact words, but he was basically saying,
Just save yourself and us.
yeah, like, just, like, we know who you are, we know what you can do. And then the other guy was like, dude, we're up here for a legitimate reason. He's not. He did nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was that, and one thing that I heard about in the last couple of years or so is, well, most people know that song from The Phantom Menace when Darth Maul is fighting Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, called Duel of the Fates.
Yeah.
Aside from the main theme and some other minor songs in the franchise, Duel of the Fates is probably one of the most popular tracks in Star Wars history. And apparently, and take this with a grain of salt, apparently the reason why it's called Duel of the Fates is because the fate of Anakin, in a sense, rested almost entirely on who died during that duel. If Qui-Gon was killed and Obi-Wan lives, then he just, of course, we all know the story, he becomes Darth Vader. But if Qui-Gon, was the one to survive, it could have been very different.
Yeah. It's a theory I've never heard before, but I can kind of get it, I guess.
Sure. I mean, I'd have to watch Phantom Menace again to see the dynamic between Qui-Gon and Anakin, but yeah, I think it has some merit. Then jumping back to Disney Renaissance movies, I thought of Aladdin, again from the movie of the same name. With Aladdin, he's established almost immediately as a thief. And of course, thievery is not something people should be doing.
Right.
He tried to justify it in the sense that he could afford pretty much nothing. He didn't really have a good place to live. He didn't have a way to make money. He wasn't really able to get food on his own unless he stole it. But he had that, and then when he got the genie and he started wishing to become a prince, he started lying a lot. Like saying, yes, he's an actual prince. He is like this royal figure, and he was doing all this to impress one woman who he got away with lying to for a while. Then she started to figure it out. He kept lying for a little bit longer, but eventually the truth all got exposed by Jafar, and soon after he sent away almost died. But at that point he's like, I gotta be who I'm supposed to be. I can't pretend to be something I'm not. So he immediately goes back into action, saves the day, and is just who he is. He's not trying to be some other figure. And that's when he and Jasmine truly form the full connection. They fall in love. She loves him for who he is, not who he tries to be. So the lying and the thievery are the big flaws in his story. But he does make up for most of it by the end.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a bit more freeing to be more authentic.
Oh, of course. And like, the truth will set you free is a common phrase that people use. The genie acknowledged at one point, after you lied to everybody else, I was starting to feel left out. And then when Aladdin lied to him, or I guess in a way he did lie, because he was saying, I'll use my third wish to set you free, and then he said he can't do that. But then, in the end, he keeps that promise and does set him free. It just took a few extra bumps in the road to get there. Then the last one, I kind of put it in its own separate category, if you will, because I wasn't sure if this technically counted Because for most of the movie, he's the main bad guy. And I was thinking of Buddy Pines from The Incredibles, otherwise known as Syndrome. It's like he started off kind of as a flawed hero. Like he was
Yeah.
just so absorbed in how much he admired Mr. Incredible.
Yeah.
And really the whole reason he turned evil is because he got rejected by his hero. And then he started doing all this villainous stuff, and he was committing genocide against superheroes. And his ultimate plan was to make and sell gadgets so that everybody would be able to be a superhero, which in the end would make no one special. But the way he did it, he went about it, and all because he got rejected by his idol. It's like, things could have been very different. He could have been a superhero if Mr. Incredible worked with him a little bit. And while Syndrome was making good points, and he started off good, the way he responded to rejection was the biggest issue, of course.
Sure. And I had a few examples of my own. The first one, this is kind of mostly based on like a couple of the Sam Raimi films. Spider-Man, the titular hero. I mean, he is kind of a multi-dimensional character for the most part, I think. And he from the he starts off. We're kind of introduced to him as this sort of dorky, insecure teenager. And he's kind of looking for Mary Jane's attention for a lot of the time, and he even goes as far as to go a little bit crazy and enter an amateur wrestling match just so he can get a car to impress her. And then, when he doesn't get the money he expects, he pretty much just lets the robber go. And then the third film, probably more famous example, he gets naturally consumed by the symbiote and becomes the persona known as Bully Maguire, and kind of becomes what some might call a big shot. So he does a lot of great things, but he also kind of finds himself in a bit of trouble now and then.
Yeah, that is for sure. In each movie, he had different issues that he was tackling. The part from the first movie, that's well known. That's the one you mentioned. In the second movie, now that he's an established superhero, he's having difficulty maintaining being a superhero and just being a normal person. And there's a lot of stuff that he misses out on because he's too focused on being this hero. And then the third one, like you said, he gets infected by this symbiote, which brings out some of the worst in him. And it wasn't until he hit the person that he was deeply in love with that he realized, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And only at that point did he reject the suit. But it's like in each movie, he had different flaws, which I think, from a storytelling standpoint, is kind of a good thing, because then it's not just repeating the same thing over and over again. But yeah, there were definitely some issues that he had to work out. He eventually did each time. But yeah, that's a great example of a flawed hero.
Yeah, and then one Disney example I thought of, Woody from the Toy Story franchise. I mean, he's definitely one of those mixed bag sorts. He's got some positive leadership qualities. He pretty good at thinking on his feet, but he also has, of course, some time during the first film where he gets bitterly jealous of the new arrival Buzz Lightyear, and at one point he famously plots to. He's so consumed with it by this point that he plots to have Buzz fall behind Andy's dresser. Of course, most of you know the plot. It doesn't quite go as planned. He ends up actually falling in a bush outside the window, and most every other toy turns on him, and perhaps rightfully so, arguably. But
Yeah.
yeah, he's eventually redeemed, but he does kind of have a bit of a judgment breakdown, you could probably say.
And he wasn't making all the best choices, even when he was just trying to have Buzz come down to earth, like come down to reality. It's like he's not the character he thinks he is. He's just a toy model of him. Uh, yeah, the whole incident where he gets super jealous and ends up accidentally knocking him out a window is one of the big issues he has in the first movie. In the second one, he goes through this whole story arc where he meets his own group of characters from his own show, and he gets so absorbed in how famous and I'm trying to find the right word when it comes
Profitable, because they're
Yes.
being donated to a museum.
to he's worth a lot. He's a famous character, and he almost rejected all the friends he had, including Andy, if you think about it, by sticking to his guns for a while and wanting to go to this museum. To which Buzz points out, watch kids from behind glass and never be loved again? Some life. And it wasn't until Buzz really flipped the conversation from the first movie, reminded him that he was a toy, and reminded him that there's a lot of people here who came all this way to come get you because we actually cared, and we believed what you, and I believed what you told me in the first film. And Woody almost neglects and turns away from him again, but then he's like, wait, what am I doing? And then he does decide to go back, is stopped briefly by the prospector. And I don't know if he had too many issues necessarily in the third film, because he was trying to get back to the house. He was trying to be there for Andy if he could. But once he realizes that, yeah, Andy's grown up and it's time for us to move on, he actually does. It stings a little, but he still goes through with it. And while I haven't seen the fourth movie, from what I understand, he runs into Bo Peep and decides to go with her, and again, leaves everybody else.
Yeah, but I think they all kind of peacefully agreed on it. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but I feel like everyone seems happy at the end.
Yeah, maybe I need to see the movie in its entirety, but yeah, from face value, that's what it looked like. But yeah, the first two movies especially, Woody had some problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I thought of Charlie Bucket from the Roald Dahl book of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which of course was then adapted into the film of Willy Wonka, and then the Tim Burton Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. In the '70s Willy Wonka adaptation, yeah, I'm pretty sure this isn't in the book, but Charlie, along with his grandpa, during the tour of the factory, they get into the fizzy lifting, airborne beverage, and they kind of take a little bit of it and go floating for a while after being told not to touch it. I've heard a couple criticisms of this plot point, saying that it kind of like either destroys the point of the character or makes him not as likable, or he should have faced more consequences than he did for it, or that he got away too scot-free. Those, I think, are the criticisms I've heard of that, but I don't know. I feel like, from my memory of the book, he was presented as a bit, maybe too goody-goody, maybe a bit too, loosely speaking, perfect. So I actually thought it was actually good, because even, in the script of the play adaptation we did, it was acknowledged in the dialogue. He did he did do something wrong, but then he owned up to it later.
Yeah, that's the whole thing. I think it was used to show that even though Charlie is in many respects better than all these other kids in terms of behavior at the very least, he's still not perfect. He's only human.
Yeah.
And even then, some of the more misbehaving type of stuff that he did was kind of influenced by his grandfather. Because really, he didn't start drinking the fizzy lifting drinks until after Grandpa Joe was... And this is, by the way, before I go any further, this is based on the Gene Wilder version of the film. I have not read the book, and I have not seen the Johnny Depp version.
No.
But he's like, come on, Charlie, let's take a sip. No one's looking. And so he does. Like, Charlie could have said no and moved on, but I feel like it was kind of egged on by Grandpa Joe.
Right.
And then at the end of the film, when they're about to leave, Grandpa Joe, again, he's like, I can't believe this guy. If Slugworth wants a gobstopper, we'll get him one. But this time, Charlie realizes what he should do, returns the gobstopper to Wonka, and at that point, Wonka is like, okay, this kid is honest, he's authentic, and even when he does something wrong, he owns up to it and tries to fix it. So it's like, yeah, Charlie has shouldn't issues. He's certainly not as bad as the other kids.
No.
But I mean, that's why he won in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's not a perfect kid, but he's not supposed to be.
No. And then I thought of one obscure example from an animated Peanuts cartoon. Specifically, this is Charlie Brown. For the most part, he never really does anything terrible. I mean, he has we know he has his countless failures, like losing at baseball and things, but we never really see him really have Usually we don't see him really have a moment of super bad judgment, except for at least this one scene I thought of, and this was a short, I think it was a half-hour animated Peanuts cartoon titled "You're in Love, Charlie Brown," which is basically about him trying to form a connection with the red-haired girl, and one way he tries to is to kind of sleep at the bus stop overnight or something, so he can maybe catch up with her the next day or something. And then when he sees the bus, it takes off without him, and he ends up late to class. And when he's asked about it by his teacher, he kind of, he has this moment of frustration and says, "It was because I missed that stupid bus." But then immediately he goes, "Oh, good grief, now I've done it."
What? I don't know if I saw that one. Maybe I'm thinking of the Valentine's Day special. But yeah, Charlie Brown being infatuated with this little red-haired girl is a common piece of storytelling that they use. I don't remember that one, but I kind of get why he would be frustrated. And the fact that he immediately acknowledged what he just did / said is honestly pretty fascinating, because not everyone will do that.
Yeah.
And that whole sequence kind of shows that there are some people that will get so infatuated with somebody that they will do anything possible to try and win them over. And some people, whether in fiction or even in real life, will do some very bad things in order to try and get that to happen.
Yeah. There is one cool moment immediately after that where you can hear Charlie Brown's thoughts, and he's actually mentally quoting a psalm from the Bible, which is pretty cool, but then immediately follows it up with, "My stomach hurts."
That's another thing I admire about Charlie Brown, or even this YouTube channel called Dude Perfect. They're big names, like so many people all around the world know who they are, but they still like quote the Bible. They still pray. They still reference God, which not a lot of famous forms of media or famous characters will do.
Yeah, and Charles Schultz, I believe, was a devout Christian himself. I feel like that factored a lot into like the stories that he wrote. In and he writes a little bit about some theology, Bible theology here and there, even in like the comic strip of Peanuts, and on occasion in some of the animated specials and such. So I think that's neat.
Yeah, they definitely could have done what a lot of Christmas specials will do, where they just focus on, like the typical Christmas traditions and stereotypical things, like the whole, like decorating the tree, lighting the lights, and
Yeah,
giving gifts, which can still be good things.
yeah,
But the Charlie Brown Christmas special quoted the entire passage of when the shepherds were in their field, and then they were told that Jesus was born.
yeah.
Which I think some people speculated was why Charlie Brown Christmas was taken off the air for a little bit. But it's a big deal, at least to fellow Christians like ourselves,
Yeah.
that there are some big names, again, fiction or real life, that will do this sort of thing, regardless of what the response might end up being.
Oh, yeah. One another example I had written down. You kind of mentioned a syndrome earlier. I thought of Mr. Incredible, specifically his sort of arc in the original film. A big major storyline, of course. He is rightfully kind of sad and resentful that he doesn't really have the freedom to fight crime like he used to. But he gets so bent on chasing that lifestyle, that life again of being a hero, that he pretty much neglects his whole family in the process. And it takes him a while, even when his wife tells him, even after his wife tells him, what you're doing is kind of negligent and of our family, which is what you have now. He's still really bent on getting that life back, and neglects his family in the process, like I said. But after disaster kind of strikes, he slowly realizes, you know what? Yeah, and I've really messed up. I've taken you guys for granted. I even nearly lost you guys.
Yeah, he has that whole sequence when they're all captured in Syndrome's lair,
Yeah,
where he's like, I've been a lousy father.
yeah,
Or, he neglects his family, and like you were saying, Elastigirl was like, you're uprooting our family again so you can relive the glory days. And he doesn't even deny it either. He actually tries to justify it in a way. And of course, the whole, like the way he treats his fans, particularly Buddy Pines. And even though he wasn't like cheating on Elastigirl, she saw several signs that made her think he was, and he wasn't really being honest with her, which didn't make things any better by any means.
Yeah, he was very much hiding what he was really doing, what it was all about.
Oh yeah, when he did start doing more hero work again, like his family didn't even know for a while, and really they only found out kind of by accident in a way.
When he
Because it
really
wasn't
got
until
into trouble.
after she went to see Edna that she fully discovered what was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I've talked about this example before. Superman in Superman 2. For the most part, I never really got. I don't know. Probably didn't get as much invested in Superman in general as the next guy, perhaps. But I liked a couple of the films in the '70s, the two films that were done in the '70s, the first two. That and Well, one thing I did appreciate now, because Superman, I think, is probably portrayed for the most part as too perfect, but I feel like there was one human or bad judgment moment in the second film when he decides to relinquish his superpowers just so he can be with Lois Lane. And soon after that, he gets in a fight, gets banged up badly, and finds out that his enemies from his planet Krypton are kind of wreaking havoc in Washington and stuff, and he realizes, oh man, I have really messed up.
Yeah, I think most people that I've talked to, at least, hold the first two Christopher Reeve Superman films in high regard.
Yeah.
And a big reason for that, I think, is despite the fact that he's this superhuman character who's a symbol of hope, truth, justice, the American way, what have you, and he still has the occasional bump. He also isn't perfect, and he'll make some iffy choices. Another good example is one of the most divisive scenes in a Superman film that I've ever seen, which was from Man of Steel, when instead of trying to find some way to not kill anybody, Superman ends up breaking Zod's neck before his laser vision hurts these innocent humans. Now, granted, I think that was meant to serve in a way for him to be like, okay, I can't believe I did this. I'm never going to do this again. I'm not going to kill anybody. But yeah, the various Superman films, including the Christopher Reeve ones, like, he's a symbol of hope. He's supposed to be a beacon of all things positive, but that doesn't mean he's flawless. Like you pointed out, he has his issues, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And the last example I thought of was a character who's a bit more interesting, a little bit more complicated than even probably the rest of the ones that I've listed. Has a reputation for being a kind of a villain or antagonist as well as a hero. And specifically, I'm talking about the Professor Severus Snape from the Harry Potter franchise. For a little background, he teaches the subject of potions at Hogwarts and is kind of the leader of the Slytherin house, which has the house within Hogwarts that has a reputation for producing some rather evil students. And from early on, it's implied that he has this sort of animosity specifically toward Harry, and is like speaking harshly to him, and like in the book series and film series, he's like always kind of nagging on him, calling Harry like entitled or bratty or something. But it's kind of slowly revealed throughout the series that he has a history with his family. Like he went to school with Harry's dad and kind of had an animosity with him. And I think it's also implied that he had an interest in Harry's mom. Of course, she ended up marrying this other guy. And so I feel like that, like, there's at least some explanation there, I think, of, why he maybe resents Harry and calls him entitled, spoiled, famous Harry Potter and stuff. But he also at the same time, there are some moments, or at least one moment, where he is shown, where he is actually looking out for Harry when he's in trouble. And even at the end of the book series and the film series, Harry describes him as one of the bravest men he ever knew. So it's a bit of a complicated, maybe complex character, but and probably with some issues, but well mixed bag.
Yeah, sure. I'll definitely have to take your word on this character specifically, because as a kid,
Yeah,
I wasn't allowed to read or
sure.
watch Harry Potter. Maybe I'll get around to it at some point. We'll see. Well, one thing I can say, based on what you're telling me,
Yeah,
is that people who are in the same field as someone and are a lot more experienced than they are, the way they treat them can have a big influence on them later. Like, if they're constantly talking down to them, then the person they're talking to may end up making some bad choices later to try and prove a point. And that's just one example. But from what I can tell, despite the way he treats Harry sometimes, he does legitimately care for him, which I guess Harry Potter himself acknowledges at some point by calling him a brave man.
yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's my whole list. So that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this episode and for the season. I know we're both looking forward to beginning our rehearsals for Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat with Artists Unlimited, which will kick off practices late August, August 25th, and we'll perform in November. And I'm sure we'll have some good stories to tell when we return sometime afterwards. And in the meantime, stream us on Spotify, YouTube, and utilize my Instagram, Seth_Mariano_AU, YouTube comment section, and yeah, just questions, comments, anytime are welcome.
Absolutely. And even though we're not going to be recording anything for a little while, it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to stop paying attention to what you have to say. If you have any ideas for future episodes, future seasons, we would love to hear what they are. If you have questions about any of the previous episodes, we'll be on the lookout for those, just in case there's something you want to know. Or if our thoughts have changed, maybe. But long story short, we'll keep in communication if you guys have any questions or comments, like Seth said. And when we come back, we'll tell you all about how our show went and probably what we think the next one might be.
Well, all right. Until next season, everybody take care. Bye-bye.
So long.